So good evening, everybody, and welcome to this webinar today. We are very happy to have a very eminent speaker with us and somebody who has very deep insights into consumer research and marketing insights. We're very happy to welcome Manish Makhijani, who is the Consumer Marketing Insights Director globally for Unilever. And he also heads the People Data Center here in India. And the People Data Center, while he may be physically located here, is divided into multiple verticals, which each allow deep insight into different aspects of understanding consumers, for which he's responsible globally. And I'm sure there are parts of it that he's responsible for globally. And he will share with you as we go along what he does. Uh, he is a qualified engineer and has done his business management. And interestingly, he's worked in research on both sides. That is, he's worked for research organizations as well as now for 20 years in a company like Unilever worldwide. And he's not only worked in India with Unilever, he's worked in Thailand, he's worked in Singapore, and also in the UK. And not just on a category, but on multiple categories and brands, so that he has experience across product categories, which gives him very rich insight because he's been able to look at how consumers are responding across markets. And now that he's in charge of the People Data Center with verticals across the world, he will tell you the kind of information that they use to draw insights, information that comes spontaneously from customers and so on. Before working with Unilever, he worked for Starcom and Kantar TNS, which is a research organization. And therefore, there also he had exposure to multiple brands and multiple clients. So he has deep insights into analytics and how to draw, actionable insights out of information and data. And he's very passionate about being able to use this to enhance the marketing and strategic capabilities of organizations. In addition to what he does, he has written various papers for market organizations. You know, he's a vice president of the Market Research Society of India, and he's contributed papers to them as well as to other organizations, and has been a visiting faculty at institutes like MICA and all the way up to the London School of Economics. So he's a practitioner and he's a teacher. And I think we can't think of a better person to be able to give us insights into market research and how to use them for strategy and brand marketing. As a human being, he is the father of two giggly girls, he says, and he's passionate about movies, music, and food. And now he's based in Mumbai. So, welcome, Manish. We're very happy to have you with us. Thank you for accepting our invitation to share your knowledge and expertise with those present.
Thank you, David. That was a rather long introduction and a bit embarrassing at parts, but yeah, thank you. Glad to be here.
So, what I think we could start with, Manish, is if you could tell us how you developed an interest in market research and how that has shaped your career so far.
Right. So I think it's been a long time since anybody asked me that question because I've been in this research for more than 24 years now. But yeah, so I was always interested in psychology, human psychology growing up because my dad was a professor of psychology and philosophy.
Wow.
But he used to focus a lot more on psychology. So while growing up, I was in a vernacular medium school. I was in a Sindhi medium school, actually. So, but we had lots and lots of psychology books in English. And my parents used to say that you have to, while you're in a Sindhi medium school, you must read enough English so that the transition is easier once you go to college. And there were a lot of psychology books around. So I used to read those. I didn't understand a lot of that, obviously, at that time. But the psychology was sort of ingrained in my head. And therefore, I was always interested in human behavior, human understanding as such. But engineering or medicine is what you typically choose. And I was a lot more analytical, and I loved mathematics and physics as well. So I went for engineering. What happened then was that I didn't like my job as an engineer. I didn't particularly enjoy that job. And I wasn't sure. The future looked very bleak at that time. And I wasn't sure as an engineer I was enjoying. And, I felt passionate about doing whatever the engineering companies were doing or whatever jobs were possible at that time. So then I decided to go for B school because since I was interested in the human, in the consumer, in sort of human behavior,
Right.
human understanding psychology. I used to love watching advertising as well while growing up. I used to love watching ads and think about why have they made this ad like that? Why, what if they had made it differently? Oh, look, but this brand is doing, Santur is doing very differently from Lux, and that's doing very differently from Synthol, and so on. So, so when I decided to go to finally B school, I went with the purpose of joining advertising, thinking I want to do advertising, and I actually called up an ad agency while I was working as an engineer, and they said, "Are you creative?" I said, "Yeah, I think I'm very creative." "Can you write?" "No, I can't write." "Can you draw?" "No, I can't draw." So they said, "Then you can't come to ad agency, but you can be in client servicing." Interestingly enough, I said, "Okay, but how do I do client servicing?" They said, "We need an MBA for that. You need to do an MBA, otherwise you can't get into client servicing." So I said, "Okay, now looks like MBA is unavoidable." So I went to do MBA with an intention of going into advertising. But what happened was that, first is I enjoyed the research, market research, and quantitative related subjects immensely in my B school. I loved them. And I sort of before the campus placements, I spoke extensively to my seniors who were in the advertising industry, agencies, and 2, 3, 4, 5 years seniors who are spent enough time in ad agencies. I spoke to people in marketing and sales, and I realized that the job on the research on the advertising agency side didn't look as glamorous, wasn't as glamorous as it sort of seems from outside. And I realized that actually research was an area where you use analytics, which I enjoyed, statistics and multivariate analytics I enjoyed, and the consumer behavior, consumer psychology, and the marketing. So research is where marketing, consumer psychology, and analytics comes together. So I thought there could be nothing better than that, because the three things that I really enjoyed come together. So I went after research agencies. I was actually in a placement committee, so I made sure that they came to campus, and I got recruited by one of them. So and that's how. So I've never looked back. I've always been in research. I did spend 2 years in an ad agency in Starcom in Leo Burnett.
Hmm.
So I did go to ad agency for 2 years. After about 4 or 5 years in research, I thought, let me try that. But I was in the media function, so I did that for a couple of years. But then I decided to go back to research, and so I've been in research throughout.
What a fascinating journey that is. And your passion for advertising began even when you were doing engineering, when you used to watch the ads.
Yeah,
That's so fascinating because I went through the same thing. And later on, I spent 10 years in advertising, right? And developing strategy and so on and so forth. So we have a lot in common there in terms of the passion for
yeah.
consumer insight and advertising. Now, market research should really inform strategy when it comes to brand management or development or communications development and so on. You know, so how do you kind of ensure that research remains integrated into this chain of development from product to communications and advertising?
So I think that's a journey that happens in organizations, and that journey happens differently in different organizations. And we've been on our own journey as an insights function in Unilever, for instance. So I think the first of all, the research team, the research function within an organization has to evolve from being a research provider. It has to evolve from being a research provider to a strategic consultant, to an advisor provider. So they have to evolve from that. So what happens is when you're a research function, typically everybody sees you as an order taking function, in the sense that oh, we need to test this product, can you get this product testing done for us? Oh, we need to do that focus group discussion, can you organize that focus group discussion? Oh, the focus group discussion is over, can you make sure the agency gives us the report in 3 days time? So you're sort of taking orders from marketing and getting the work done from research and providing it. You're a bridge between the two. So it has to evolve from that to become a function which actually is giving insights on the table and not just giving a
Yeah,
research report. So that comes with a lot of credibility that the function has to develop, that individuals in the company have to develop.
right.
The relationships have to be developed with the marketing team and the advertising agency, etc. Because in your experience, ad agencies, for example, hate researchers, generally speaking, because researchers come and insights you to come and say this ad was rubbish and it didn't work. It's not going to work on air. Whereas the agency people have spent, and even the marketers have spent loads of time creating that ad, and you come and say it's not going to work because it's not memorable enough. It's like telling somebody that your baby is ugly. So therefore, if you want to be able to have a meaningful conversation with the marketing head and with the advertising agency people, telling them what's the best way, you need to have the credibility. Plus, you need to have the genuine insight as to why this
Right.
particular ad is not working and what will make it better. and sometimes even going to the brief, saying the brief instead of this should have been that. And then next time when they're writing a brief, they'll involve you at the brief stage itself, saying you told us last time the brief was wrong. Tell us how do we get the brief right? And then you say that's because your insight is wrong, and then you get into the insight. So that's how gradually the credibility of the function gets involved, and you evolve from being a research provider to an insight provider. So you've got to have genuine insights, and that's how sort of it evolves over a period of time. I think it also has implications on the kind of talent that needs to be hired, because historically organizations typically hired, I mean the client side organizations typically hired good researchers who were good thinkers in research, which is great. You require that, but I think you also need people who have the leadership capability, people who are, of course, they're insightful and they need to be know the right methodology from the wrong one. But they also need to have the leadership skill to be able to drive the change agenda and to be able to stand up and say, look, this product is not going to do very well in the market, so let's not launch it. Instead, why don't you develop this kind of a product? You delay your launch by 6 months, but develop the right product or develop the right ad. You should have the credibility and the authority to stand up and say that. And the leadership skill and the right leadership mindset for you to know when to say that and when not to say that, and then what is the right time to influence the key stakeholders. So those softer skills are as important as the research skills. So the talent that you hire, the grooming that you do to them, how insightful do you make the team, etc., all makes a difference in it being a research function into an insights function,
Right.
I would argue.
I think you put that across very well. It has to be a strategic input rather than a kind of a service department that provides services for research that is asked for,
Yeah,
right? So that also implies that you could be doing things which are on your own initiative or doing things proactively so that
absolutely.
it feeds into the overall strategy for the company or the brand.
Absolutely, because you take the same example of advertising, for instance. If I am insightful about the brand, if I know, for example, why is it that people use Surf Excel? Because a detergent is a detergent. How different can it be? You would argue. But why is it that people choose Surf Excel? Why is it the largest brand and not Ariel or not Ghadi? If I'm really insightful about that, and I know this is the reason why they make that choice, and then when I look at a new ad that has been made, I'm just taking that as an example. And if I don't think the ad is right because it's hitting the right levers, I know that when I do a pre-testing, the results are not going to come out right. So I can then in advance do some work and say that, look, this is the reason why people use your brand. This is the emotional hook that you have. And that's a hook that you have over a period of years. And this ad is not hitting the right emotional hook. So I can have those arguments ready when the advertising pre-testing comes out. But this is like a tip of the iceberg. You can you can take it forward a lot more and say, can I have all the answers before the business realizes that they have those questions? Can I prepare that in advance? Can I look at some trends? Can I see what's coming up in the future? Can I look at how consumer trends are going to evolve, and are we ready for it or not, etc. So that journey sort of goes several steps further in being proactive.
So, do you also get into kind of mapping out what are the pillars on which a brand like, say, Surf Excel is built, so that no matter what the piece of communication, you ensure that it stands on those pillars plus whatever they want to communicate?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So what is it that, so you look at, first of all, what are the category drivers? Why is it that people buy? How do people make a choice of a brand in a category like detergent? So those are
Right.
category drivers. Then you look at what are the brand drivers? What is it that, like in the detergent category, for example, the detergent has to clean your clothes properly.
Basic.
So that's one of the fundamental drivers. And the fragrance might be another one, for instance, that detergent and the clothes have to smell nice. Then you have to see how your brand is performing on those. But there might be other couple of other emotional hooks that you as a brand are providing over a period of time. And you need to make sure that that's consistently there in advertising. So that your brand is, even before you show your brand in the ad, people should know that this is a Surf Excel ad. That's when you've understood what the true advertising of your brand is about, and you don't need to show the brand name constantly on the side. Um, so what happens then is that consumer insight teams can't really give good insights and strategic advice unless they've understood the brand completely,
Correct.
unless they've understood what's the heritage of the brand, why has
Yeah.
it evolved, why people make a choice. Look at a brand like Lux, for instance. If you ask any woman, nobody will tell you that she thinks she's going to look like Deepika Padukone after using Lux. Nobody will tell you that. But we still sell it on Filmi Sitaron Ka Saundarya Sabun for 80 years now, and it still
Yeah.
works. So
Yeah.
why does it work? What is the insight of why that works? If you haven't understood that, as a brand manager or as an insights manager, then you can't produce the right ad. then you wouldn't know what's the next ad for Lux should be. Then you wouldn't know what the packaging of Lux should be, what the fragrances of Lux should be. So therefore, the brand managers have to be as insightful about consumers as the insights managers have to be insightful about the brand. And that's when they work together as two sides of the same coin. That's when they work together as an integrated fashion, and insights get sort of built into the fabric of the organization. I think that's when insights then can provide the real strategic guidance and can be the strategic advisor rather than the order taker.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. This order taker terminology, as opposed to being the expert advisor,
Yeah,
makes all the difference, because then you have what the term is psychological legitimacy.
yeah, absolutely.
So that
Yeah,
they listen and they implement, because they know that what you're saying is going to be good for the brand.
yeah,
So that's terrific. I also wanted to know,
yeah. Sorry, yeah. Go ahead.
uh, since you're working with every one of the brands and often as a strategic advisor, uh, do you all work out clear cut psychographic profiles brand wise? Like you were saying, you have a Lux and you have Hammam. Now,
Yeah,
obviously, there are two different price points in two different segments and two different kind of persons buying the brand.
yeah,
So, the psychographic profiling, so that we know whom we are talking to.
yeah.
So, do you get into those areas as well?
Yeah, absolutely. As in the inside teams. Yes. So inside teams, generally speaking, get into all the areas. There are no areas that are left untouched, so to speak. So what is the psychographic profiling? What's the segmentation of the market? For example, if you look at let's say soaps as a market, what's the psychographic segmentation, and what are the different states of mind or need states?
Right.
What are the need state that different soaps are appealing to? So while Lux and Santoor, for example, might be competing with each other as a beauty soap, and Godrej number one might be another beauty soap, etc. They're all offering similar benefits, but they are occupy completely different need states. So what is the need state that you're occupying, and what is that
Right.
state of mind, and what sort of consumers you usually are in that state of mind, are in that state of mind every day or once in a while. So, for example, the very famous example is Moti soap, for example, which people buy only during Diwali. So it's a festive soap, and you buy during festivals or like Diwali, for instance, or weddings. So people are not in that state of mind or not in that need state rest of the year. They're in that only in that period of time. So similarly, you if you want to freshen up and immediately get charged for the day and feel energetic, that you're there only in the state of mind only in the morning shower. Evening shower is more like relax, unwind, so that I can sort of finish the day and have a good night's sleep. So those are different states of mind. So different soaps target different states of mind. So we have a detailed understanding of that. We map that out, and therefore accordingly judge and decide what sort of advertising is suitable for a brand and what is not suitable for a brand. If that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. I'm so glad you brought up this Moti soaps example. It's Moti soaps is bought and used like it's a luxury. It's like your mini spa, for example.
Yeah,
You use it to pamper yourself,
yeah.
and not as a regular soap. Could you kind of paint a picture for us in terms of the needs it addresses and the psychographic profile of the people who use it, so that people can grasp what it's all about?
For Moti soap specifically, or any soap.
Any soaps, eh?
Yeah. So I'll give an example um, of a soap, a beauty soap, for example, and Moti is part of that. Now, what happens is that a lot of women, generally speaking, in India, for instance, because of the affluence, middle class women typically and slightly lower than middle class, don't have access to too many makeup products and don't have access to too much of accessories, makeup accessory, because they don't want to spend that much money and they don't necessarily have that affordability.
Mm,
So also the thing is that a lot of women, particularly those who are not working, looking after homes, the homemakers, tend to feel a little guilty about the fact that I don't want to spend money on myself. So I'm not going to apply lipstick every day. I'm not going to apply the cream every day unless I'm stepping out of the house to do something. I will put some makeup. Otherwise, I don't want to use anything on myself when I'm sitting at home. Now, what happens is that a strong part of femininity is that you want to feel good about yourself. Not that men don't want to feel good, but women want to feel soft skin. Women want to have good fragrance. They want to smell nice. because that's part of the femininity, and that's part of giving them confidence, even if it is for herself and not just for the husband. Or so
Yeah, I think it's tied up to the sense of well-being as a
yes,
woman.
as a woman, so you feel your well-being is in place, you feel that you're doing well, you're
Yeah,
healthy, if you're feeling nice, if you're smelling nice, if your skin is soft, etc. But you don't necessarily want to take a lot of effort to get that. Now, if you can provide it in a soap, which is smelling nice, which keeps you smelling nice for a long period of time, for a couple of hours after the bath, for example, and that makes your skin soft and smooth, then soap gives you that, meets that need that you have in that state of mind of feeling nice and soft and smooth. And that's what beauty soaps like Godrej Number One, Lux, and Santoor, etc. do. What Santoor does is that it takes a slightly different angle, and it says that it targets women who are slightly older, and therefore for years they've been showing an ad where the young girl suddenly appears, a child suddenly appears and says, "Mummy, there's a surprise element." So she's not looking as old as she actually is, because
yeah,
she's a mother of a young child. So they've targeted slightly older women for that, and they've gotten to that insight. But all beauty soaps basically target that need, saying that I want to look good, I want to feel good, even if it is for myself. And beauty soaps target that particular need state quite well. The other need states are, like I said, if you want to feel fresh. So Little, for example, for years have been saying, freshness. So we had that under the shower, the famous ad made by Lentus, the girl bathing in the shower, Preeti Zinta, for instance, which you tried to revive recently as well with other things. But the feeling of freshness, which the lemon fragrance, etc., gives you, you want to feel fresh and energized and charged up, which is a very different need state from the beauty need state of wanting to look and feel glamorous and soft and smooth and fragrant, etc., which is a very different need state. So a Little brand does that, and there are lots of other brands that do that. Synthol, for example, historically went for masculine positioning, where you had the famous ad of Vinod Khanna, for example, on the horse, on the beach, etc. A very masculine image, but freshness and masculinity is what they were targeting, which is a different state of mind targeting men. So even for a simple, humble category like a soap, which people sort of switch brands without even blinking. Somebody's offering a spoon, you switch brand. Somebody's launched a new fragrance, you switch brand. But those soap brands very carefully think about the need set that you're targeting, and you do your advertising accordingly. You do your packaging advertising. You do your fragrance accordingly, and so on.
yeah. And I think the point is to be consistent over time so that you own that position.
Absolutely. So Literal, you still think of the same thing. Lux, you still think of the same thing. Dove, you still think of the same thing.
Synthol, you think of the same thing.
Yeah, so think of the same thing. So it's consistency across a period of time. Santoor, you think of the same thing. So consistency over a period of time. So if me as an insight, if I'm an insight manager for Santoor, for instance, if I don't understand the heritage of Santoor, if I don't understand why historically they have been doing the advertising that they have been doing, and what's the need state they're occupying, and what does it mean to consumers, the recommendations that I will give for advertising development will be very shallow.
Yeah,
So that's the value that I bring in, which I can't expect a research agency to do that unless they're working with us regularly and they have a dedicated team. Then they do understand as well. But advertising agency tends to be the custodian of advertising for the brand, historically speaking. Lots more the research agencies do. But the insights team can be custodian of, what is the need state, what's the insight behind, on which the brand is based.
yeah. In the current environment, when so much of it is online and it's on different platforms and so on, there's a deluge of data and information that's available. How do you deal with this kind of data deluge, so to speak, and derive intelligence and insights out of it?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I mean, it's a problem that we as brains have as well. We're constantly on social media. We're constantly talking to people. So their brain is getting stimulated in multiple different ways, and you need to figure out as to what should you pay attention to and what is it that you shouldn't pay attention to. So it's a similar problem. So the data that is available now is so much more than ever before. I
Exactly.
don't need to say that. So obviously, the data that you get from your regular surveys that you do, the big data that you get from from the consumption of your assets that people have. So YouTube comments on YouTube, the first party data that you collect, etc. A lot of behavioral data that is coming in through technology now. So there's loads of data, and it's
Yeah.
very, very easy to get lost in that.
Which
I
is why,
mean,
the term analytics has become such a kind of a catch-all.
absolutely, which is why the term analytics has become popular. So we'll talk about that as well. But I think to me, the sharp focus of what you're looking for is extremely critical. and a clear understanding of where are you going to get it from is important as well. That's where your skill as a researcher comes in. So what is the objective? What are you looking for? Having clarity on objective is very, very important. Otherwise, you could be, looking for 100 different things and not finding what you're looking for. And then if you're looking for example, why is it that my sales are declining? And you have loads and loads of data coming in. Then you run through a hypothesis like a typical critical thinking method to say that, is my sales declining because I'm not available anymore? Have I become too expensive? Do people don't know about me anymore? I'm not top of mind, et cetera, et cetera. So you run through that and you identify, okay, looks like I'm not available anymore as much as I used to be. Then you can start digging deeper saying, I need only that data. I need the distribution data and a lot more details. Who's selling my brand? Who's not selling? What type of outlet is available at? Then I'll focus only on that data. So I think the ability to do critical thinking is far more critical today than it used to be 20 years ago, 10 years ago, because that gives you the ability to filter out what you don't want to see and filter out what you don't need to see. Is a very, very important element, I would argue.
Yeah. In fact, what you are telling me reminds me of, the famous book on marketing by Rees and Trout,
Yeah,
Marketing Warfare and
yeah, yeah,
the 22 Immutable Laws and all of that,
yeah,
where he says back in those days that the brain has to kind of deal with over 3,500 brand messages a day,
yeah,
and we automatically have a filter.
yeah,
And what comes in is only what is relevant to us or something that we are interested in.
absolutely.
And if you were to get past that filter, if you're not in the choice set at that time, it has to be on the power of an idea
Yeah,
or a benefit.
yeah.
So what you're saying is when you have this deluge of data and analytics, we must be able to set up the filters to be able to take out the extraneous stuff and be able to home down on what we need.
Yeah, because otherwise, what happens is that all the insights people are also human beings, right? Though you use a
Yeah,
lot of AI and analytics, etc. And as human beings, we've got our own biases, we've
yeah,
got our own filters.
correct.
So, let's say if I went out and I didn't find Axe deodorant, for instance, in two shops that I went to. Now, being the Unilever person, I immediately might start thinking, looks like the distribution of Axe is not very good because two shops I didn't find where I usually find it. Next day, I'm having a conversation with the Axe team who are telling me that the sales are dropping. I would immediately conclude because of that priming, saying your distribution must be dropping. And therefore, I'll filter out everything else and pinpoint saying
Check.
that must be your problem. Now, that's the bias that I have as a human being because I face the distribution problem of Axe as a consumer. Whereas that may not be the problem because two shops is not available doesn't mean distribution is a problem. So if I recognize that that's my bias that's coming in, I'll say, okay, let me look at pricing, let me look at distribution, advertising, blah, 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 and then conclude with the distribution as a problem. Then I'm being aware of my biases and therefore setting filters accordingly. If we don't do that consciously, then our subconscious filters, our own human biases will take over and lead us to wrong decisions.
Yeah, lead
And I
us up
think
the wrong.
insights, people doing that should be completely unacceptable because we should have insights about what our own biases are.
Yeah, we should be mindful.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I think this is a very good segue into the people data center functions that you head. Can you tell us something about that so that we can get an idea of how it is organized to be able to draw insights from multiple sources?
So there are two streams of insights in the people data center out of the three streams that we have. One is the social listening part. The other one is consumer engagement center. The third one is more for digital marketing, capturing the first party data, analyzing, segmenting, etc. So, but the first two parts, social listening is something that we use tools extensively to listen to the conversation that people are having on social media. Now, this is obviously conversations which are public.
Yeah,
Uh, it's not that we're looking into some people's private conversation because WhatsApp conversation, for example, is completely private, completely inaccessible to listeners. Similarly, if your Facebook page is private, then nobody can listen to it. If your Facebook page is public, then listening tools can listen to that. So in that sense, we listen to what has been made publicly available. So we listen to conversations that people are having on social media, on blogs, on forums, etc., and that gives us lots and lots of insights. So particularly if you're looking for trends, for example, when the COVID thing came about, nobody could have predicted, despite all the trends and all everything that we do, nobody could have predicted that 2020 year is going to be the way it was. Um, but once started hitting, by end of Feb, March, when the signs were very clear that troubled times are coming up. Immediately
Yeah.
we started looking at what people are saying. So what people are thinking, and how their emotions are changing and what are they going through,
Right.
is something that you could do entirely through social listening. You didn't have to do any consumer research, because people are talking about it, people are chatting about it.
Right.
And by June they were already saying how there have been too many webinars, and I don't want to attend any webinars, all of that. So how is the sentiment changing? And initially people were excited about the fact that it's okay, I'm going to be at home for a few weeks, I'll have a better work-life balance, etc. And then how people started getting tired of that. You didn't have to do any research. It was all available on social media, for conversation that you're listening to. You can, of course, be a bit more sensitive in how you're listening to, in the sense, make sure that you're listening to people of different profiles. So you're not only listening to, let's say very affluent consumers, because they will have a certain way of
Right.
dealing with things, but you're looking to people from different parts of the country. You're listening to enough men, women of different, economic strata, and so on and so forth. So you do your
Across segments as well.
across segments as well. So you do your research rigor well enough so that you're not being biased by one segment or the other. Uh, so that makes a huge difference in getting the insight. So similarly, so that's very easy to do. Trends is relatively easy to do in that sense because people are talking about it. But things that are not very easy to do, for instance, people don't talk about the fact that I've got bad breath. Um, they don't talk about it. So how do you get insight on things that people don't want to be, personal issues that people don't want to disclose? So there are ways and means to sort of get those tricky things as well. So you can figure out, as to, a lot of people are looking for shiny teeth, and they're having conversations saying, how do you get shiny teeth? Do you actually really get bright white teeth? Because so and so toothpaste is claiming that your white shiny teeth in a week's time or whatever, is that really true, etc. People chat with each other. So though
Right.
that you can relatively easily get, but are people have bad breath problem? Do people have gum problems? How do you get this? So there are tricks that we've learned over a period of time. How do you get even those kind of things? Um, but you complement that with the primary research. You always sort of have consumer surveys being done. You always do qualitative research to supplement that. So that's one part of what the new way of doing research is. The other part is through the care lines or the call center route, which is the global vertical that I lead. Now,
Right.
what happens there is that we speak to millions and millions of consumers across the world every year, and these are people who are calling us unprompted,
Right.
on their own. Now they're calling us either on phone or writing emails or having a social media chat with us on the chat, etc. Now these are people that are reaching out to us on their own. A lot of times, about 30% of the time, they're reaching out. Not thankfully, a majority of the time, but about 30% of the time, they're reaching out to us because they have a problem and
Hmm.
they want to complain, saying the shampoo bottle top was broken. What do I do? Or I think or whatever. I don't think the detergent is working very well. Is there a problem with the detergent? Or whatever the issues might have been. But 70% of the time, they're not reaching out to us to complain. They're reaching out to ask a question, a genuine question, or give a suggestion. Now, imagine you feel strongly enough for a brand or a product category to reach out. In today's world, people don't have time. People don't have time to reach out to their banks and check the bank account, or
That's
look up.
fantastic, actually.
Yeah, but somebody to reach out to say there's deodorant. I think the fragrance is a little too strong. Can you guys do something about it? Or you used to have that fragrance in your deodorant, which I don't see. Can you bring it back to the market? It's fantastic. That tells you how interested they are in those products and brands. That itself is a sign of involvement. So the insights that you get from those unprompted conversations are massive. So we've done, we brought products and variants back into the market which had been delisted, because people have started calling us and saying, why is this not available? You had that vegan ice cream in Turkey, for example. People said you had that vegan ice cream last summer. You haven't brought it back this summer. Why? Can you please bring it back? We loved it. When you look at the sales and you think, okay, it's 10% of my total portfolio. Maybe it wasn't very successful. But when you hear so many conversations, people asking for that, then you know that people loved it and they noticed it. So bringing back variants that you stopped, introducing new products, taking care of the problems that people are facing, etc. As we do massively through call center sort of conversations, which are very very insightful, and they also tell you latent needs that people don't necessarily know how to articulate.
Right. What I'm going to do, Manish, is I'm going to ask you one more question, which is to do with the COVID lockdown period, so to speak. You already touched a little bit on that, but it'll be interesting to see if you've actually tracked it and categorized it in stages and things like that. And after that, we'll start answering questions because I see there's a,
Lots of
oh,
questions here.
yeah, I think it'll be a good thing to do.
Okay,
Um,
sure.
so, with all the social listening, you've already indicated that you saw stages in how people were responding to the lockdown. Um, so, can you tell us if there was a clear kind of a progression and that you were able to do something in terms of insights for marketing from there?
Yeah, loads of things. So yes, there was a clear progression. I think there was a progression in terms of the mindset of what people felt. And we've all seen a lot of that on the news, sort of reflected,
Yeah,
but sort of to be able to predict in advance and to say this is the journey that we're going to go through. So are we prepared for that? Was something that we did through analytics and social listening. So, for example, different segments went through different journeys. So, more affluent people who didn't have the problem of money, and even if they lost their job, they could still survive for a few months or a few years without having to worry about money, were in a very different space of mind. So,
yeah,
they were a lot into well being, saying, okay, I've got a few months, I'm going to lose that weight that I've been wanting to lose, or I'm going to do that regime, that I've been wanting to do, etc. So they looked at it as an opportunity to grow and either physically, health wise, or in terms of learnings they wanted to have, etc. So that was a very different journey. Versus if you look at the lower end of the spectrum, then we saw the problems of the migrant workers, etc. So they were in a completely different journey. And people in middle class were sort of stuck in between. So they were not as badly affected as the migrant laborers were, and they were neither were they in a comfortable position where if the salary didn't come for a few months, it didn't matter. So they were sort of in between. So they had to be very cautious, and they didn't know how to sort of how long it's going to go and how you're going to look after that. Um, Also, what happened was that there were lots and lots of different things that we noticed. You couldn't do research. Fieldwork was shut down completely for a few months
yeah,
because of the lockdown. So doing fieldwork, recruiting some panels, some people on forming a panel, having conversation through with them on WhatsApp every week, for example, and having a different panel were the kind of things that we were doing. Video calls, those who were more affluent and had smartphones or laptops, but either WhatsApp calls or calls with other people who didn't have those were the kind of things that we got into. But the thing that women, for instance, who were working and who were now at home because of the lockdown, they went through a really big problem because
yeah,
what they were saying is that, look, earlier at least I could get out of the house for 8 to 10 hours because I had a job to do and come back. Now that I'm at home, everybody at home is expecting me to do all the housework. Plus I'm expected to work from home as well because my offices expect me to work. So their think trouble. I mean, their sort of problems multiplied a lot. So the incidence of home abuse, incidence of violence, etc., went up dramatically.
yeah,
So we did activities not just in terms of launching new things, the new the surface cleaners, the new toilet cleaners, all of those we launched, which are very obvious recommendations to give. But even what is it that brands can do for the mental and emotional trauma that people are going through, for the abuse
right.
that people are going through, for employees or elsewhere outside? How can you help communities? Those are the kind of things that we set up to do. Even we even did things like how is the workplace going to change if people come back after 3, 4, 5, 6 months?
Mm,
Then how is the workplace going to change? If they come back after 12 months, then what would it be like? If they come back 24 months later, then what would it be like? We predicted that, and we said, how should the office environment change? So, for instance, if you're very comfortable working from home now, you would tomorrow say, why do I need to go to office at all? I'm perfectly happy at home. My productivity hasn't gone down. I'm meeting all the expectations and more. Then you might say that, okay, I'm happy to go to office once in a week or twice in a week, but 3 times in a
exactly.
week I'll work. So then you say, okay, then the time that I need to answer my emails and do work my own, let's say I need that for 1.5 days in a week, I'll do that from home. 3 days if I need, I'll do that from home. But I need 2 days of collaborative where I need to go attend meetings,
Right.
do a project work, do a workshop, do idea generation. I'll go to office because I need to be physically around people. So your office needs to be designed differently. Your office structure can be designed very differently. Make it more
Absolutely.
collaborative spaces, whereas allow people to work from home. So we gave those sort of recommendations, and you might have seen in the news. I'm not sure, but Unilever in New Zealand has started a pilot. So Unilever has started pilots in different parts of the world differently. So I was sort of leading the initiative where we gave those recommendations to Unilever. So Unilever in New Zealand has announced that it will be a 4-day week, and they announced it's a 4-day week in sometime in early December. And across the world, people have responded saying, "Wow, what a great initiative!" We're watching what Unilever New Zealand, end of the pilot results are, and whether Unilever wants to extend it everywhere else. But it's a great initiative, and blah blah blah. So those kind of initiatives where you reduce it to 4-day week, where you allow people to work from home, where you look after people in terms of their well-being and the things that you do, etc. And we did that with all our partner agencies as well. All our call center employees, for example, they had to work from home. Now, at a call center, you've got all your technology, you've got your CRM platform, you've got your headphones. If that advisor has to agent us to work from home, they don't have the technology at home. So across the world, we had to figure out as to how do you send them laptops, desktop at home, how do you send them headphones at home, how do you put the protocols about data protection, because you don't want them
Yeah,
to record the
absolutely.
data, phone numbers, with the privacy concern. How do you pivot everything suddenly working from home? So we had to work with our agencies to make sure they are gearing their staff to work with us. Then their staff's well-being we looked after, sending them stuff or looking after them, etc. So I mean, COVID was like not just insights team took sort of charge for lots and lots of such initiatives, and not just giving recommendations on new products to be launched. New products everybody launched. Home care as a business grew, skin cleansing as a business grew because those are the obvious categories. So everybody did that. But I think getting those insights about consumers through listening, which are
Yeah,
we opened an employee helpline, for example, which didn't exist in Unilever World at all, where any employee of Unilever could call and ask for help, anonymous. So if I'm facing pressure at home, I'm working too much and I'm feeling pressure, I could call Unilever and say, I need help. Can you guys help me reduce my work, or can you give me a psychiatrist I can speak to, or can you give me legal help? Whatever help you need, anonymous was provided by setting up that helpline. So those are the kind of things we did because we saw the underlying tensions that were only going to get worse over a period of time, and they did.
yeah. That's amazing, Manish. And I think what that also shows is changes that might have taken place over 10 years took place in
Yeah,
8 months in a
yeah,
revolutionary way because of the constraints that
absolutely.
were imposed. That's fantastic. Okay, I think we should move to the plethora of questions that we are facing. And so let me do that. Okay, I went right to the top, so I'm in the no voice stage and you're frozen stage. One sec.
So I can start sort of looking at some questions that seem interesting and useful and addressing them. Is that okay? Or do you want to look at them and
Yeah,
tell me
that's
which
fine.
ones?
See what you find is
So there's a question that Arun Shankar Kumar has asked: How can small
people
businesses do
data center.
research? How can small businesses do research? Is it more like a DIY approach for them? So I think people think of market research. Arun Kumar, that's a good question. Thank you for that. I think people think of market research as an activity to be done and where you need experts to get in and do it. Like set up a research, set up a survey, people respond to that survey and come and listen to that question. Yes, that's classical, traditional market research. But I think market research has evolved way beyond that. And therefore, it's not that you don't need skilled practitioners. Yes, of course, you need skilled practitioners. You need experts for sure. But at the heart of it, market research is about understanding people. It's about understanding your customers. It's about understanding your consumers. What is it that drives them to buy and participate in your business versus competition? Or when do your people leave and go to competition? That's the kind of a thing that you can do it yourself, by talking to a few customers and making your organization, making your business more consumer centric or customer centric on your own. Of course, you can take the help of research agencies and experts, but what is a good practice is, for example, what we do in Unilever and Hindustan and Unilever, we even do till today, is that we have a full consumer centricity program. So people go and meet consumers. We call it Consumer Connect program. Go and meet consumers on their own, and we organize it for them, of course. But even the leadership team from Sanjeev Mehta and the leadership team that works with them, even them, they spend at least 10 to 15 hours every month meeting and talking to consumers directly. So they go to their houses and we organize them. They go to their house. We'll talk to them like head of BPC, personal care business would go to a deodorant consumer or a face care consumer, talk to them saying, what are you using? How are you using? Are you using my brand? Have you seen my new ad? Just that. So 15, 20 hours, if you spend every month talking to consumers, it gives you a real feel of why your consumers are buying you or why they're not buying you or what's coming up new in the market. Like Wow, there's something called as Wow shampoo, which got launched a few years ago now, only on e-com. But we knew about it because we were talking to consumers, and consumers were telling us, some leading edge consumers who were buying shampoo from e-com at the time. We knew about it before it gets reflected in sales data and before it becomes, because consumers are talking about it. So I think that consumer centricity is about the organization culture. It's about the culture in the business, which you can very much do yourself as a business owner or as a leadership team or as a participant in the business. Go talk to your customers, see why they're buying you, why they're buying competition every few days, because that will keep you consumer centric. And then from there you start expanding. There will be some things that consumer connect will not be able to tell you, But you can start putting some infrastructure, research infrastructure in place, saying, okay, I'm going to do, let's say if you're into physical product, I'm going to do product benchmarking once every year to see how does my product compare to others. Or if it's a service, then I'll do a benchmarking. If you're regular into digital advertising, I will put into practice saying, are my ads good or bad? I will put that benchmarking into place. You can gradually start putting, small steps, infrastructure of research in place, but start by bringing in consumer centricity into the organization by responding, by meeting and talking to consumers yourselves. I'll
Yeah,
just complete this by giving you one example, which people often talk about a lot, which is Apple. So Apple, particularly in the Steve Jobs days, particularly, used to claim that they don't do market research, and market research is rubbish. They don't do market research. Um, Now that is obviously bullshit. They do market research, but I mean customer satisfaction, etc. They do, but even for their product development, they do market research. But they don't do traditional market research. Like we would give our product samples to people to try and ask them questions. We'll place the product for a few days to use, etc. They don't do it that way. What they do is that the design developers, the designers and the developers in Apple themselves are very high end and heavy users of the products they're developing, like a phone or a laptop. So they use it extensively, but they also talk to other heavy users. So they would go and talk to other heavy users saying, hey, this is what the phone is looking like. What do you think about this feature? Do you think this works? Do you think this screen size works, etc.? That is nothing but market research. You don't call it traditional market research, but that is market research. But that is consumer centricity. That's bringing the consumer into the decision making, even if you're doing it yourself, even if you're talking to experts. And in tech products like that, you have to talk to leading edge consumers because only they will know exactly what is the problem in your product and they will know how to correct it. If you talk to layman doesn't know. We didn't know what iPhone was before it came about. Nobody could have, a common person couldn't have told you that we need an iPhone. So take approaches like that and they can work wonders.
yeah. I was just going to say that when you're consumer facing, if the culture that you build is not marketing led, not consumer focused, then it's not likely to succeed very much. So, as you
Yeah,
said, from the person at the top, you gave the example of Lever, where the head of the company talks to consumers, and the example of Apple. Jobs used to talk to people to look at what is it that they would find interesting to use, which they've never used before, which is why he could come up with disruption like he had, you
yeah.
know,
So he
knowing that
saw the
what was
latent need in the market,
correct.
which people can't articulate.
Yeah. So, which is the next question you'd like to address, Manish?
Um,
You want to attempt the MBA one?
which one? Tell me what's the
How
question.
strongly do you feel that you need an MBA to fit into advertising?
No, I don't think MBA is required for advertising, to be honest. I don't know, David, what you think, having spent so long in advertising as well. But I think that what MBA gives you is a very, very good grounding in business. It gives you a business understanding of, how do you run a business? How do you look at a business? How do you manage a business? That's what MBA gives you, which is brilliant. Now, advertising is an integral part of the business, depending on the industry that you're in. If you're in B2B, for example, then advertising doesn't play any role at all.
Yeah.
But if you're into consumer products, then advertising plays a massive role. So having that business understanding, having that business understanding is important to see the role that advertising is playing. So to that extent, MBA is important. But if you look at some of the great advertisers, they were not MBA. In fact, if you look at the creative directors, like if you look at Piyush Pandey, for example, those people are not MBAs. But what people like Piyush Pandey have is a very good pulse on the consumer's mindset and what consumers are thinking and what is their mindset, particularly in smaller India. And because they have a pulse on the consumers, a finger on the consumer's pulse, is why they can create great advertising. And that is what is needed to be a great creative creator of advertising, not necessarily a business expert.
Yeah. I'll just add to what you said. David Ogilvy famously said, no, you need to have a liberal arts education to be an advertising man, which
Absolutely.
simply means you have to be interested in multiple things and especially people.
Yeah.
You don't really need an MBA. He himself was not an MBA, but he and Bill Bernbach, legends in advertising, who were
Yeah.
not MBAs, but they understood people, they understood what it takes to have an insight, and they did simple things that had a profound impact. I think that's what it is about. And Piyush does things that way. So that
Yeah.
kind of,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
what else can we look at? Yes, some of the questions are really interesting.
So do you believe that advertising glamorizes the actual product irrespective of its potential? Um, it's something that advertising is accused of sometimes, but I don't think you can generalize it and say yes, advertising does it or no, advertising doesn't do it. I think generalizing it will be very, very wrong. So yes, sometimes advertising does it, sometimes it doesn't do. Now, I think what happens is that you need a hook. You see lots and lots of hundreds of advertising in a day, for example, as a consumer. And like we were saying that, your brain processes out 95, 99% of those ads, but one or two ads will remain in your mind. So if you want to remain in consumers' mind, if you want to remain, if you want to be memorable, then you've got to find a hook into the consumer's mind. And often that's what the consumer insight role that consumer insight plays, saying this is the hook that you can use. Creative people obviously use that consumer insight to create an advertising around it. So for instance, if you look at the Surf Excel advertising, coming back to detergents, since we were talking about detergents, Surf Excel advertising, Surf Excel talks about the fact that daag achhe hai, dirt is good. We've been doing that for years and years. And what it is basically trying to talk about is a broader philosophy of life, saying that if you don't let your kids play in the dirt, they're not going to learn the crucial lessons of life, and they're not going to, experiment and fail, experiment and succeed. So therefore, you must let them play. And if as a part of that they're getting dirty, don't worry about the dirt. I'll take care of the dirt because Surf Excel is there for the dirt. But you let them play and let them get dirty, and therefore dirt is good. Now that's a very broader philosophy and comes from a deep consumer insight that consumers are afraid of letting their children play because of the fear of failure. So sort of dirt represents a fear of failure. So it's taken that philosophical stance saying let them play and let them experiment in life. And because of the deeper philosophy, Surf Excel does lots of initiatives, guiding parents on parenting tips. What are the right thing to do? How do you decide how do you give right education to children? How do you look after your older parents, etc., etc. How do you let your children experiment with different things in life, giving them opportunities to experiment with life, even giving opportunity to younger kids to go and spend time with older people who don't have any children or older people in old age houses. We run programs where older children come and sort of register and they go spend time with older people in old age homes. So that kind of a philosophy, the brand has taken a much higher platform. Now, if that's the hook, and if your advertising therefore is talking about how dirt is good through different ways and means, then that will remain in people's mind and that will remain memorable. Now, you could sit back and say, hey, but you're taking such a lofty platform. What has that got to do with detergent? You're sort of telling me that by using Surf Excel, suddenly my children are going to be experimentative in life. No, they're not going to be. So we're not trying to glamorize the product by talking about a lofty ideal. No, we're not. But all we're saying is that we're taking a stand. We're expressing a point of view that dirt is good and experiment with dirt, and therefore we're giving you an opportunity. So therefore, is Surf Excel sort of glamorizing the detergent by taking it off theater? No, it is not. But it is helping consumers in the right way, and therefore differentiating its product, and therefore creating advertising that remain in consumers' minds. Is what I think through that example.
Yeah, I think in the many webinars, one has faced this question also from people who say, but you glamorize by showing women without a drop of sweat as they're cooking, and they're also neatly dressed and all of that. So what I tell them is at that point, you don't want to see somebody who's going through the same struggles as yourself. You want to see something a little bit more aspirational, right? It's not like your table setting is the same as it is in the restaurant. You don't
Yeah,
go and say, oh, you're glamorizing a meal.
yeah,
You enjoy it because it's
giving an
presents to you
ambience. Yeah,
nicely. Yeah.
absolutely. So, no, unfortunately, I will not be offering an HUL hamper for the best questions. I would be doing that. What advice would I give to research enthusiasts who want to get into consumer insights and how should they start their career? So, I think this is something that I've been saying to a lot of people who care to ask, and over the period of years that hasn't changed. If you want to get into consumer insights, you got to be interested in understanding people. You've got to be like one of my dear friends, Poonam from TNS Kantar. She calls it vulgar curiosity. So you've got to have a vulgar curiosity in the sense that, understanding why people are behaving the way they are behaving, what ticks them, what drives them. If you're not interested in people, if you don't give a shit, then don't get into consumer insights, I would argue. Don't even get into marketing for that matter, because it is all about consumer insights. So first of all, if you are interested in understanding people, then it makes sense. Uh, um, but you also therefore need to be I mean, that's an inherent trait that you bring to the table, but you need to understand the science part of it, as to what are the techniques, what are the best methods, how do you do research, how do you weed out the good from the bad in terms of techniques, etc. And using that plus your passion for consumer understanding is what will drive you to become a good consumer insights professional. Whether you decide to work on the agency side in analytics or at how customized research, or whether you decide to work on the client side, I think that's what will drive you: consumer understanding and a good, solid, firm understanding on the science of market research.
Okay, at this point, I have a question, Manish.
Yeah,
This today there are a number of brands that do purpose-driven advertising.
yeah.
So when do you think that would work, and when would you recommend it?
Okay, so we have actually done a lot of work in that space, as you would imagine, because a lot of our brands are purpose-driven now, and a lot of them have been historically. Like Dove is sort of founded on a very, very strong purpose, and the insight again was very, very strong on which the whole brand is based. Um, so we've done work to understand how purpose drives, and there is a clear evidence that purpose drives brands. And in the last 10 years, brands with purpose have grown a lot more than brands without purpose. And not just our work, but there are enough and more papers in the industry that you would find which say the same thing. Now, uh, I think it works only if the brand truly means what it says, first of all,
Right.
and and that can happen when the purpose is truly integrated into the brand, what the brand stands for. So, for example, again, Surf Excel, if it is says "Daag Achhe Hain," so if you say that our job is to provide parenting tips and the right parenting guidance, that's the purpose, so that they provide the right environment for the children, then that's integrated into what the brand stands for and the brand philosophy. Then it doesn't feel like you're doing something else. Whereas, if you just once in a while do some promotion, which got nothing to do with your
Doesn't
brand,
work.
then it doesn't work, because then it's a consumer promotion, it's a gimmick. Then people will forget about it as quickly as your ad is finished. So it has to be very, very well integrated into the brand. So brands like Dove, brands like Surf Excel, for instance, don't struggle with those kind of things at all, because it's so well integrated into what the brand stands for. So that's the biggest thing, really. And often the brands have to change fundamentally their positioning, or have to, over a period of time, strengthen that aspect, if they want to be purposeful and grow purpose. But it can be something simple. For example, if it's a food brand, then it could be about saying that, okay, I'm going to use only organic ingredients in my food product, or I'm going to buy only from organic farms, or this is what we should be doing for farmers, and I'll help them because I'm going to integrate my backend, or whatever. You can
Yeah,
link it to that, to what your brand is over a period of time. But if it doesn't feel like an artificial thing attached on top,
correct.
then it works brilliantly.
Yeah. Thanks. In fact, what you said about Surf Excel in terms of the parenting tips is what prompted me to ask you that question, because I had a feeling it was coming from there. So,
Yeah, absolutely.
okay, let's see what else you can ask. I mean, answer.
Why advertising does not play any role in B2B? It's a simple question. I don't need to answer that, because your consumers are not. Advertising is a waste because a lot of your consumers are not on that media. Great articulation. Thank you for that. To deliver as a document put out on social media. Yes, we do. Youngsters in college who aspire to get into advertising, I've answered that. You've got to have passion for consumers. You've got to love advertising. And you've got to love brand strategy as well. You need to understand, how the advertising fits into the brand strategy.
Shriyan Malik has an interesting question. What is something that global brands are doing that Indian brands are behind but need to do? Is there such a gap?
Oh, interesting question. I'm not sure I have the full answer or the right answer to that. I don't know. I think um, the scale that the global brands have usually offers them a lot more ability to do things differently and at a much larger scale than if you're only a one country brand. So in that sense, they're quite different. But if you look at Indian brands also struggle with the fact that our culture is very different from one state to the other. So what you need to do in
Yeah,
West Bengal, for example, is very different from what you need to do in UP, which is different from Gujarat, which is different from Kerala, and so on. So as a global brand, for example, we need to figure out what cultures in different countries exist and how are you going to tailor make your proposition and your advertising to different parts of the world. Similarly, Indian brands need to figure out as to how you're going to tailor make your proposition differently for different states. And I don't think Indian brands necessarily do enough of that.
Yeah.
They would have common advertising, and if they want to inject some Indianness, they would take what is their understanding of Indianness and inject that into the brand. But that is very different. The sensibilities of a Bengali are very different from the sensibility of, a Tamilian, for instance. So that understanding of how do you differentiate, you still stay core, true to what the core of your brand is, but offer different interpretations to a Bengali versus a Malayali, or and to somebody who's a Gujarati. I don't think the Indian brands do enough of that, and the brands who do that really well, are the ones that are successful. Either they have an aspect in the brand that appeals to all parts of India, irrespective of where you are, or the adaptation is very, very good. If you know what I make sense. So some of the good brands, what they have done is that they've started off from one part of India. They've done well there. Then they've gone to the other part. They've understood the culture. They've understood the distribution networks. They've understood the ways of working there, and then they've expanded. Then they've gone to the third one. Then they've gone to the fourth one. They have usually done very well because they've expanded gradually, rather than saying, "Okay, I'm going to do this all India launch ad with the Bollywood star," and then you realize, oh, but half the South Indians don't recognize Bollywood stars, and the Bengalis look down upon Bollywood stars. And you hired a Bollywood star thinking you're going to be successful in India, but then you realize, okay, half the people don't recognize them. So, I think the global brands do that quite well, which is good understanding of culture, good understanding of how do you sort of stay true to your core, but have your variations and versions across markets. I don't think Indian brands do that for different states, which they do, which they should do, given the diversity we have.
Yeah, in my experience, Indian brands are also not as marketing led because they usually succeeded in one place,
Yeah.
and that success makes them think that we are very strong here, and unless one of the uh, younger generation comes up and says, no, no, let's not try and do the same thing. Let's try and understand the market. That transition has to happen, and there is a struggle that they go through. And
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of Indian brands are sales driven. So they would say that, I will figure out the distributors in a new state I'm going to,
correct.
and I'll figure out my sales people who can sell to retailers directly. I'm going to start expanding. So they're very sales focused, and they look at how do you expand sales across the country,
Yeah.
which is different from being marketing focused. And if advertising is a key part, then that makes a difference. I'm just going to answer one question quickly. I know we are over time, but does one need to know data science and have technical knowledge to understand consumer insights? So consumer insights is about like I said, your innate ability to understand consumers, and a lot of that comes from your ability to connect the dots. So I saw somebody, for instance, eating a ketchup, and I saw the same person using, an Axe deodorant. What is the connection between the two? Is there a connection between the two? What is the commonality in the household? And you saw them watching Netflix. So you get these random pieces of data. How do you connect and get an insight? Is what the consumer insights is about. Now, you need to have a technical knowledge because you will end up using a lot of analytics. Sometimes you can connect the dots with your mind. Sometimes you connect the dot using science and analytics. So therefore, having a knowledge of analytics is very, very important. But that is not alone enough. That is not going to give you success. That's like a foundation. So that's like a foundation that you must have. But above that is your ability to intuitively understand consumers, and your ability to connect the dots. So what will happen is that, let's say you engage with an analytics agency, and they came with an output of let's say let's take a simple thing like a regression analysis. They came with an output and said that the consumption is dependent on these things, is what regression shows. Whether the output is strong enough, meaningful enough, whether it's reliable enough and valid enough, you must be able to understand that. Otherwise, they might just bullshit their way through to what they're trying to recommend to you. So you at least need to understand as to how do you interpret a model, how do you know whether the model is reliable and valid, etc. So for that, you need the technical knowledge. And if you're on the client side, then you will evaluate different vendor partners to say, should I do modeling with this guy or with that guy? So for that, you need to understand that. So it's like that's a science part of it. So insights is a true integration of science and art. It's a combination of that. So you must have the art, of course, connecting the dots, inherent ability, interest in consumers, interest in brands. But you must have the science part of it as well. Without that, you can't succeed. So unfortunately, I can't tell you that, no, you don't need to understand analytics to be a successful. You need to understand, you need to have the science, but you need to have the artful skills as well.
Yeah. In fact, I would add that I suppose the art part that you're talking about is really about being emotionally intelligent in
Yeah.
terms of looking at how the data is used. Great. Are there any concluding remarks you'd like to make, Manish?
Um, I don't know. I think the world of insights, analytics, research, whatever you call it, is changing. Has changed very rapidly in the last 5 years, and it's going to change even more. So I
Yeah,
started 24 years ago in the industry. It looked very different from the way it looks today. And like in a lot of other industries, technology has come and started playing a massive role in it.
yeah,
So because the computing power has got enhanced so much, because the artificial intelligence has come in, is why analytics is so much stronger and powerful than it used to be 20 years ago. So it's going to change continuously. So I think sorry, Rohit Pankar, to not meet your expectation. If you think it's a very basic session, apologies for that. But technology is going to evolve. So if you want to be in consumer insights and if you want to be in consumer insight expert, you must understand the role of technology. You must understand the role of analytics, and you must keep enhancing your gut feel
skills.
about the consumers to be successful in that. And consumer insight is and has to be the backbone for any business for it to be successful. Is how I would conclude.
Thank you so much, Manish. I think it's been a very insightful session, and it also gave us a very good idea of how a company like Unilever really kind of builds a capability to be on top of consumer feedback and insights at all times to be able to help shape the brands and continue to grow them. And while smaller companies may not be able to do all that a Unilever does, but it does give them a good idea of where they can start and start building those capabilities going forward. I think it's,
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah.
It
Thank
was a
you very,
pleasure to
very
be
much.
here. Thank you for inviting me. I hope that not too many people were like David, Rohit Bankar, who thought it was a basic session. But if you have any questions, comments, suggestions, feel free to write to me. I'm Manish.Makhijani at Unilever.com, or just um, at me Makhijani. I'm at the Twitter or whatever. I'm sure you can find me on social media very, very easily. Write to me and tell me if you have any questions. I would love to engage, or if you want my help in any way. Thank you.
That is a true research person reaching out to people. I think that's great. And that's a very good way of ending this. Thank you very, very much. I hope all of you have enjoyed this session. The whole idea was to be able to bring to you the potential of research in helping shape marketing as well as brands. And I think Manish has done that very, very well. Thank you, everyone, and goodbye.